Building a family can be a complicated, messy, lonely, and sometimes heartbreaking process. But you don't have to navigate this challenging journey alone.
Welcome to the All Paths podcast, where we support and celebrate all of the different ways there are to try to grow your family. We are your hosts, Kate and Emily from the nonprofit organization All Paths Family Building. And today we're talking with Lana Manikowski about her journey and her work in this space. Lana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So before we get into your story in more detail, we'd love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, thanks for wanting to include my story. So I'm Lana Manikowski, married for 16 years to my awesome partner, supportive partner, Jack. And we have a fur child. Her name is Coco. She's 7.5-year-old mini Aussie doodle. And we'll talk more about this in the episode, but I went through a 7-year journey through fertility treatments and left my journey without a baby and decided that adoption or any type of third party route to parenthood wasn't the right fit for us. And I'm living my life childless, not by choice.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I know you're also a professional in this space, but we'll start with your personal story. So can you take us back to the beginning? Where did everything start?
It started when I was 37. I had been married for 2 years at that point, and it was a very simple question that a close friend of mine asked me. I remember it vividly. I was shopping in the cracker aisle at the grocery store, and we were just chatting, and she asked me a question that changed everything for me. And she asked, "Are you and Jack thinking about having kids?" And I honestly said, we've been trying. I had got married at 35. So I was before that very focused on career, focused on my, personal growth was very important for me financially to be independent, to own my own condo, to do all these things that were very important to me as a focused career person and someone I saw as a successful woman. And when I stumbled upon my husband, I was 32. We got married at 35. So from there, I just thought, we'd start having kids. So when she asked me that question, I, in hindsight, realized how naive I was that I didn't even question why at 37, for 2 years of trying, I hadn't gotten pregnant. So it was through that conversation that I then went and got some workup done, and I got a diagnosis of unexplained infertility. We started on an IUI pathway in the beginning, thinking, oh, this will be easy. We'll get this figured out. And boom, boom, boom. My husband and I both worked in the medical field. So we thought we know the right people, we know the right questions to ask, and we're going to get this done. And then I left my journey at 44 after going through multiple rounds of IUIs, IVFs, Reiki, acupuncture, laying on energy mats. Like I tried everything and went through at multiple clinics, both in Chicago where I live and outside Chicago. And at the end of my treatment pathway, my last conversation was offering me resources for adoption or a donor egg. And the last conversation was, think about it, let us know. And we thought about adoption and pursued that route for a little bit. But in the long run, if I have to be honest with myself, I decided not to do it because I didn't know if I could handle going through more heartache of something not working out. And it was hard for me to admit that because I really feared that people didn't think I desired motherhood enough if I didn't continue on doing more things. And I knew in my heart that I couldn't go through more heartache. So that's where the journey ended, the conversation ended, because I had no reason to call the clinic back. They gave me these offerings of things to pursue parenthood, and nothing was ever talked about if you remain childless. we have resources for you as well. So I didn't, from a patient perspective, didn't see a reason to call them back because that wasn't one of the offerings. So I sat very isolated from most people around me, including family members, my friends who were all growing their families. And I had silenced my story from a lot of people. So I didn't talk about it a lot. So I didn't really have an avenue to open up to many people. I wasn't even offered a therapist through my clinic.
Oh,
And
wow.
I really struggled quite a bit. And that's what brought me to doing this work. I just by chance discovered a life coach, and she wasn't even focused on anything related to reproductive care. She was a weight loss coach because I had gained so much weight during my treatment path. And for the years that continued after my treatment journey, just continued to forget about caring for my body because I was very much in dissension with my body for not working for
Mm.
me during my treatment path. So I started working with this coach and I just realized these big changes in me. And I thought, wow, I wonder if I could do this for other women. So in 2020, when the pandemic came and my corporate life slowed down, I enrolled in a year-long training for life coaching and started my podcast and my coaching practice in 2021.
That's so great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And it is such an important juncture when you get to that point where you are exploring or even beginning to think about other options and you make the very difficult choice that they are not for you. And so to hear that you really did not have support at that moment, that is so huge, is just so sad to hear. And obviously, we wish we could have been there for you during that time, but I do love that your lack of support really led you to want to be part of the solution for people that do not have support during that pivotal moment in their own journey to build their family. So I wish it had been different for you. And obviously, like we and others do provide childless, not by choice support groups and things like that. But it's only, these supports are only as good as people knowing that they're out there. And so I think there's a lot of people who suffer alone because they don't know what exists, and traditionally I think there has not been enough that recognizes this outcome.
I remember leaving my journey and, just feeling so isolated. And the only person I felt comfortable talking to was the woman I had been going to for acupuncture. And I remember asking her for a referral for a therapist. And I ended up not calling that therapist because I thought, well, they don't really specialize in infertility. And, I sort of talked myself out of it. I don't know. This was 2018. So I don't know what was going through my brain, but I think to myself now, wow, the fact that I had to go find care for myself or seek it through my acupuncturist. And, a lot of people don't have those abilities to advocate for themselves, or, I'm always been a real outspoken person. So I think, for me, I'm very much an extrovert. So I can't imagine what it's like to not have those qualities and be so alone that you don't even know who to ask for care. So I love that you do this work. And that's why I was so flattered to be invited to be on this podcast, because I know the amazing work with your support groups. I follow you on Instagram and, always get the pop-ups on your stories of the different groups that you're supporting. And I really thank you for that.
Oh, well, you're so sweet to say that. And another thing that really resonated so much with what you said, well, a lot did, but one thing that you said really did, which is that I think one reason why I think you will and our community will never ever hear don't or see don't give up on anything that we say or do, because it's sometimes or often well-meaning, but to me, it's one of the most angering things I see in our community, because to me, quote unquote, giving up is one of the most courageous things that can happen in our community. And also not something to be pitied, like that it is actually choosing your self in many cases, or choosing your partnership and moving forward in a different direction than you planned, but a totally beautiful in its own right path. But I think it is a resolution to trying to build your family that comes with more judgment, I think, or a fear of judgment. Like you said, that you were thinking like maybe people will think that I don't want it hard enough, or I didn't try hard enough to be a parent, even though you obviously went through a lot. But even if you hadn't, it's like, why don't we respect and honor wherever the end is for people on that particular path? So I don't, again, I feel like sometimes I'm just like saying something and not asking a question, but just I really appreciate so much all that you're doing to really honor this outcome, and that it isn't an end, it's just a turn in the road. That's part
Yeah.
of why we changed our name to All Paths, is because like, it feels like we're all on different roads and they lead different places and take different
Yeah.
turns.
And I'd love to weigh in if I may right there, because I found myself for a long time not sharing my story because I felt like the people that I knew that were going through fertility treatments, that I was the worst case scenario. And when I would share my story that ended without a baby, that I would somehow deflate them and not give them hope. And as I continue to connect with professionals in the fertility space too, I often hear when I ask, do you offer resources for your patients that are potentially going to end up childless? They say, well, we just don't know how to bring it up because we don't want them to think that we've lost hope in them. And while I think that's a beautiful, compassionate way to serve your patients, I do also think that there is a disservice that patients are experiencing when they're not being addressed the full picture of what is possible. And I often think about it as like a cancer patient. If someone is terminally ill, I oftentimes think of, when you end up childless, you're kind of like that terminally ill patient, and you wouldn't send them out your door without something or without a conversation that, this treatment might end up this way, or you might not go through chemo and have your cancer gone. Like, I truly see infertility and childlessness as devastating and as heartbreaking as something like a cancer diagnosis. So I really think it's important that people understand, while we want doctors and medical team that are cheering for us and giving us the best opportunity to increase our chances to build our family in the way that we want to build it, we also need to have a component of reality that dragging someone into another cycle who might not emotionally be there, but feels that that's what they need to do because, the pom poms and the cheerleaders are there, isn't always in the best light, in the best energy of the patient, and really what's the best outcome for them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, ignoring a potential realistic outcome doesn't make that go away. It's just there and hidden. And like you were saying, you feel like you can't even talk about it if that is a potential path that you are thinking about. Can you talk more? Are you comfortable talking about kind of that whole process, the conversations that you and your partner had when you were unfortunately trying to navigate that without guidance from your clinic or from other support networks?
Yeah, there was a lot of indecision, I would say, that we sat in, where we kind of left the door open to looking into adoption. I think in our hearts, we weren't sure that wasn't the right answer for us, but we thought it should be. But neither of us wanted to say that we didn't want it because we were fearful that we'd regret it one day, or that one person would say, well, I really wanted to do it, but you didn't want to do it. And I have to say that there was not a lot of examples of what life could look like if you don't have children, that I looked at saying, well, okay, well, if we decide that this is not the right answer for us, there's this person in our life, or there's that person in our life. And of course, you've got the Oprahs and, maybe Jennifer Aniston, who's been very open about her fertility pathway. But, real life, blue collar, white collar, however you want to say, people. I wanted to know that there were people like me that I could relate to, that were working class people that were just, trying to make their way. So back to your question about, that decision process, and my husband and I, we decided early on when we started our fertility journey that we were going to be on the same page with one another. And if one person didn't feel something was right, or um, wasn't in, total agreement that this was the right pathway, we would be open and honest with each other. And I think that I remember that trust being built back in the beginning, back in 2011, when we went through our first IUI cycle, and we had that agreement, because you have to make so many decisions. What are you going to do with the embryos? What if you get divorced? What if someone dies? There's all these things, and we were not prepared for those decision processes. So we established as a couple that we would be on the same page with one another. And I think, like I said, neither of us were ready to say that adoption wasn't the right answer for us. So we sat in indecision for a long time, but we finally we did some research in adoption, international adoption. My family's from another country. We wanted to adopt from the country, if we were going to adopt from that country. And when we got deeper into the weeds of what that would entail, we just both agreed that that wasn't what we were up for, and called it there. But then after that, I would say our marriage became, I don't want to say like rocky emotionally, but in the back of my head, I questioned, are we going to be enough as a couple if we don't have children? And there was a big level of guilt that I carried. I was like, gosh, how could I even question my marriage after I've had this person by my side, supporting me and going to every appointment and taking time off work and doing all these things? So there was such a sense of guilt that I carried, that I was questioning whether my marriage would be enough without children. So I started talking about it with him and just saying, I'm worried. Like, I love you. I know that we have a strong foundation, but I just want to make sure that we're focusing on each other and focusing on how we can grow as a couple if we're not going to have children. And so that has really been a strong foundation of how we have built our marriage and built our relationship with each other without kids. Because for a long time, I thought the kids would be the thing that kept us unified, and we'd be rushing here and rushing there and making decisions as parents together. And when that doesn't come, there's often a loneliness that you feel when it's just the two of you. So I hope I answered your question. I feel like I got a little bit off on a
Yeah.
tangent there, but
No,
it's worth
No, that
noting,
was
because I think
wonderful.
a lot of couples do struggle with,
yeah.
are we going to be enough without children?
And I think that
Yeah.
the guilt that you talked about is super relatable on a number of levels. I mean, anybody going through fertility treatment or family building challenges knows that there's a whole lot of grief and guilt and anger, and it can be hard to navigate
Yeah.
that as one person, let alone in tandem with somebody else. So that
Yeah.
foundation that you built, right in the beginning, so important. And I can imagine how helpful it has been moving forward
Yeah.
through
And the
everything
guilt,
you've been through.
I think it splays over to other places. I had female factor infertility, so there was a huge level of guilt of, he's not going to be a dad because of me, and he should have married somebody else. Like, I wish that,
Mhm.
you know, we would never would have found each other, because he could have gone on and had his dream of parenthood. And then my in-laws, his parents, weren't going to be grandparents because I couldn't give them
Mhm.
grandchildren. So there was such tiered grief, and almost like this shame that I was not worthy of being his wife and being in this, relationship. I was the one who screwed it all up for everyone because my body wasn't able to create a child.
Yeah. We're so hard on ourselves. And then I think society doesn't help, like I said, by I feel like being so judgy about the decisions that are made, and the paths to parenthood that you are or are not willing to pursue, and why. And it's just like I just feel like, don't we just need to just be gentle to each other, because whatever the reasons are that you do or do not want to try different paths, we just have to honor and respect the person that has come to that very difficult decision. So can you talk a little bit about the ways you have had a full I know, because I know you have a full and beautiful life together. What are some of the ways you guys have like really invested in your relationship and invested in a very full and joyful life?
Yeah, well, I think we do a lot of goal planning together. And it's hard when you don't have the milestones of parenthood to sort of set the track of decision making or points in your life of, sending the kids off to school, going on college visits, potentially if your children get married or becoming a grandparent. So when you don't have those cadences established in your marriage, sometimes everything just sort of blends and you just sort of exist. And so we've been very goal focused as far as like, okay, at this age, what do we want to be doing? Do we want to be staying in Chicago? We recently bought land in Michigan, which is one of the goals that we have. So we're building a house. It's going to be more of a retreat, like beach house on Lake Michigan, and deciding, you know what, like it's okay to build a house for two of us. We don't have to have a house with the 5 bedrooms like you see when you go to beach communities, and realizing that it's okay to do for us and do the things that we want to do. And all that goes back to goal planning and goal establishing. We usually do that around our anniversary. So it's something that I write about. I wrote a book called So Now What? And I talk about that of, how to create goals together and the ways that we do it. We also have a piggy bank, this little piggy bank, which I know
It's
you're
very
not on
cute.
video, but we leave little notes for each other in our piggy bank, which is random. And on New Year's, we go through and read our notes to each other of just, hey, like, thanks for making a great dinner last night. Or I love how took care of the dog when I was sick, and, just like random little stuff to just continue to reestablish those anchor points in our marriage. And it's something that, yes, you have to be diligent about. And because I think we lived for a long time after our journey ended without a baby, just sort of existing and kind of floating. And I know what that felt like. So deciding that I wanted to prioritize, and it's not just me, my husband came up with the piggy bank idea. We do this together. And you have to make the moments for yourself.
Oh, I love that. And tell your husband the piggy bank idea was genius.
Isn't
For
he
our
sweet?
listeners who didn't get a chance to see it, it's very cute, a little top hat.
Yes.
Lovely, lovely piggy bank. So since you brought up the book, I'd love to chat about that. Is that something that's for folks who are still in the decision-making process? Is that mainly for people who are on the other side and are saying, this is where our path has ended, so now what? Yeah, can you share a little bit about that?
Well, I've had feedback in both areas, people who are kind of not sure what's next, and definitely people who have left their journey and are remaining childless. And I think a lot of the reason people sit in the not sure what's next is because there is no roadmap. So while I'm very clear with people, I would never talk anyone out of continuing on with treatment if that's what they feel called to do. My journey was 7 years, never once had a pregnancy test, never have I looked back and said, I wish I would have stopped sooner. That was my path, and that was what was presented to me. So I don't ever talk people out of trying to stop treatment, but I do think a lot of people sit in the indecision process because, again, they are not given any resources or examples of what life can look like. So I've had people reach out and say, hey, this is really helpful. I'm nearing the end of my journey. I might not end up having a child. And your book was really helpful just to give me an idea and give me hope that there are people out there that are living lives that feel meaningful without kids. And then for the people that have left their treatment journey without a baby, they love having like real life examples. In my book, it's not about me. I mean, while my story is loosely woven in, it's more of a roadmap of how do you downsize when you had this house that you thought was going to be your forever home for your baby? How do you find the courage to put your house on the market and sell that dream home? How do you celebrate Mother's Day? How do you connect with your friends who have kids and still feel like you're relevant? So the book is segmented into very easy to digest chunks. So I think regardless of where you are on your pathway, you can open up a chapter and it could be relevant. But it will give you an idea of what is possible if you do end your treatment journey without a baby. I've also had people like, God bless my college girlfriends and my high school girlfriends who have been like, I got 4 kids at home. I bought your book just because I wanted to support you. And it was so helpful to me because it's more about how to create a life you love when it turns out differently than you thought. And I think there's so many different ways that we live that as humans. You get divorced, not thinking you're ever going to be single again. People lose a partner, a severed relationship. They lose, a family member to death, or all these things that we're just not expecting. And my book has a lot of prompts, journal prompts, and questions that I think allows people to expand in different areas of their life on things that they're dealing with personally beyond infertility or childlessness.
That's great. Will you show us the book and talk to us about the cover? I want to
Yes.
hear everything that went into like writing it. It looks so
Yes.
good. So,
So,
did you have a role? Did you have a role in what the cover would look like?
yes, I had a distinct role. I told people I went through two graphic designers or cover designers because I told the first one, I was like, I do not want this to look like a sympathy card, no watercolor, muty, wah wah, because I think that that's so often how we are portrayed as childless people. And while I appreciate that people feel compassion for me, I didn't want to be a sympathy card for the rest of my life. And that was one of the hardest things that I have dealt with as a high achieving person is that feeling that people feel sorry for me. And I know a lot of women hate that they are looked at as unlucky, or the people who are just like always so pitied. And it's just very disempowering for people that are looking to live a success driven life. So I said, when I have this book on a shelf at Barnes and Noble or your local bookstore, I want people to be like, ooh, what's this pretty color? What is this cover all about? So it is purposefully hot pink. And then of course, orange being the color for infertility. This is an upside down question mark because we are asking, so now what? But also a lot of people see the figure of a woman. And if you go to my website, lanamanikowski.com/book, I do a whole little video talking because there's a couple more things. I don't want to bore people if they can't see it on video right now, but you can go through and hear about why I decided to incorporate the graphics that I did in the cover. But most importantly, I wanted it to be something that people felt called to, and they felt like there was excitement and some anticipation in reading it, and not like, oh, well, I got to read this thing. I guess it's going to help me. Cause I'm more about like the positive, let's take not toxic positivity. Let's be clear about that. That is not my jam, but like, okay, this happened. Like, how am I going to make something out of this life that looks so different than I thought? So that's what my book's all about.
Oh, I love it. It's beautiful. And I definitely encourage everybody to check that video out so they can see the Easter eggs behind the graphic.
Yes.
Yeah, we can link to it for sure in the show notes.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
in terms of sort of owning things and like taking, instead of making them so sad, but like kind of making them your own and continuing to honor them. You mentioned Mother's Day specifically as being a trigger. What have you done to kind of like flip Mother's Day?
Yeah. Well, I started an event called the Others Day Brunch, and it happens here in Chicago every year, this day before Mother's Day, the Saturday before Mother's Day. And that again was birthed. And yes, I say birthed because I think that we can create and birth things that are not human in form. I came up with the idea in 2022. I had left Target I want to say it was like mid to late April, and Mother's Day banners were all afloat. And while I have a mother that I have a beautiful relationship with, a sister who has 2 kids that are my surrogate kids, I love my niece and nephew. There was this sadness I came home with that once they're gone or once the kids are grown up or doing their own thing, like Mother's Day will not have as much connection for me. So I went online and I started a meetup group called Childless and Child Free Women. And I invited whoever joined the group at that point to come to a brunch at the party room in my condo building. I live in a high rise in Chicago. So I was like, if anyone wants to come, I'm hosting a brunch. I'd love, for other women without kids, whether it's by choice or not by choice, to come. And 18 people showed up. So within a couple weeks, we had 18 people come. This year on May 9th is going to be our 5th year. And at this point, we have people that travel from all over the country, as far as Seattle, Washington, Florida, New Jersey, Puerto Rico. Like people have come from all corners of the map and hopefully even beyond that one day. But it is very much an uplifting, positive event. It's not like, let's come and talk about why Mother's Day is sad for us. It's an opportunity to meet other badass women who are childless, again, by choice or not by choice. We don't talk about it. It's not something that has to define us. We just want to come together in spaces where we're not being asked, how many kids do you have? Or, how old's your youngest? Things like that, questions like that, which can be so triggering when you are the childless person in a room or in an environment where it's just assumed that motherhood is part of your story. So I'm very proud of what I've created with the Others Day brunch. I invite people who are looking to come to an event where they are automatically welcomed and part of a very high energy, positive group of women, to look into it. I purposely do it on Saturday morning because people will sometimes, like, this year I'm doing a Friday night event where it's going to be like this pajama party, like Zen, sound
How
bath,
fun.
yoga. Like I'm adding this,
That sounds
spoiler alert,
awesome.
because I have not even told my people about this. So you're hearing it first on All Past Family Building. And we are going to then have the Saturday brunch. And then people will like oftentimes leave after the brunch on Saturday and go back to their hometowns or wherever they're from, and they can do their thing with their people if they, have people that they celebrate Mother's Day with. And I purposely plan it so that you can do all the things you want to do on Mother's Day, including recognizing and celebrating yourself.
Well, that sounds absolutely amazing. I will
Thanks.
we'll definitely make sure we put info about that in the show notes too, in case anybody wants to head to Chicago that weekend.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like people that I never met before, people who have never met each other that just followed my Instagram page have like messaged me and been like, I'm coming in. And I'm like, floored. I'm like, how awesome is that you see yourself enough that what you need, that you are willing to go into a room of strangers, buy an airplane ticket, stay in a hotel overnight in a big city like Chicago. And I'm a connector. Like if anyone's a strengths finder person, my, top 2 of my 5 are collaborator and connector. And I love when people walk in a room and I'm like, okay, you need to meet this person. I'm doing all the connections because I never want anyone to walk in feeling alone. So I make sure everyone kind of has someone that they can talk to and partner up with. And that's just my jam.
I love it. And I mean, I know Kate said this already, but I'm so sorry that you weren't able to find all of this when you were going through your own journey. But the fact that you've created this wonderful community and you have your book and these amazing events and you have a podcast, like all of this is so necessary and so helpful to anyone who is, coming behind you and saying, okay, well, what's next for me?
Yeah. So now what? Yeah. And like, I'd love to offer one last thing that I find people often struggle with is the comments and the suggestions from people around them, especially around the holidays or coming up to birthdays and realizing that it's another year you're not a mother. I created a free guide called the top 27 things people say when you're childless and how to respond. Because I find that a lot of times we who are in these outcomes of being childless after infertility are too worried that we're going to offend somebody by the way we tell our story or about how they interpret the things that we've experienced. So we often sugarcoat or don't tell things that feel authentic to us or say things in a way that we want to say them because we fear somebody else might take them in the wrong way. So I'd love to offer that to anyone who finds it helpful. It's on my website as well, and it's free if that will help you kind of figure out how to create your canned answer, if you will. I mean, I practice them. I stand in front of a mirror. I still, all these years later, just had somebody the other day who I hadn't seen in years, and she's like, "Well, why didn't you guys adopt?" And there's this bubbling that happens in your chest, and I was like, "Oh, that wasn't the right answer for us." And I sat there and I thought, oh, is she going to think that that's a weird answer? Like all these things go through your brain, but I knew that that was the answer I wanted to give ahead of time. So really it's important, I think, for women to have opportunities to decide how are you going to represent yourself and represent your story in these circles that sometimes aren't as familiar with the outcome of being childless after infertility.
I love that. And it's so important too to have the ability to think about those responses ahead of time. Cause I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm either like, I forget that words exist if somebody asks me an awkward
Yep.
question along those lines, or I kind of mumble the most inappropriate thing possible. So it's helpful to be able to sit and think like, okay, this is actually what I want to say. This isn't what I'm comfortable sharing. This feels like good to me. It aligns with how I feel about the decisions that we've made so that you're not just stuck in that moment panicking.
Yep. So I'm with you on that. So that's just a little another throw in offer of things that I'm creating because, again, back to everything I needed that didn't exist.
One quick thing with that is could you talk a little bit about what you're doing to help clinics have these conversations with people?
Yes. Well, I became a member of ASRM last year. I went to the meeting in Denver, and I had worked for 20 years in the medical field. So I understand how many things providers are tasked with, and they are expected to know everything, know how to do everything, have these conversations, have X amount of patients that they need to see in an hour. So by no means is my goal to gaslight clinics or providers. I think that they just haven't been given the opportunity or training in their medical training of how to have these challenging and difficult conversations with patients, how to know what resources are out there. I mean, they're researching how to create babies and the latest in embryology and protocols. So what I've been doing is, through working with my coaching clients and my coaching practice is understand what did you want at that time? What would have been more supportive for you as a patient? What type of conversations were given to you or were you having with your medical team that didn't land well? And what did land well? Not just all the things they need to change, but understanding like what works really well for patients when they're nearing the end of their treatment path, but how to help educate them on ways that they can maybe change the conversation or start a conversation sooner or not have as much positivity talk of, we're going to do this regardless. Doesn't matter how many rounds, I'm going to be here for you. So helping lead a patient with the language that they want to hear, which oftentimes the medical community doesn't know. The patients often leave just like me, and you never hear from the clinic again. So it makes a lot of sense that the clinics don't know how they could have done something differently because the patient never returns to tell them differently. So that's the work that I've been doing through my involvement with ASRM and the beautiful support I've gotten from the medical community in seeing that I'm just an addendum to the things that the clinic can offer and maybe hopefully build out more of a comprehensive continuum of care for that patient, regardless if they leave with a baby or not.
That's amazing. You're doing such important work, not only with, individuals who are in the thick of it, but also creating systemic change that is so needed. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Yes. Thank you.
So before we wrap up, there are two questions that we like to ask all of our guests, and we'd love to get your thoughts on these. And the first is, what is one thing that you would say to somebody who is just starting to try to grow their family?
Yeah, I think listen to yourself. And I think oftentimes and I as a woman, I'll speak from a woman's intuition. I think we often know what's right for us, but we've been trained to think that other people know better than we do. So I think that even if it doesn't agree with what other people are telling you, you know what is right for you, and lean into that intuition. And it might not always be the loudest voice in the room. It might just be a little bit louder than the other one, but trust that you know what's right for you and what's best for you.
Oh, I love that. And the second question is, how can somebody show up for a friend or a family member who is struggling? And that can be at any point in the journey, whether you're just starting, you're in the midst of treatment, you've made the decision to explore an alternate path, wherever you want to address it.
I think for me, this is what I wish and what I talk about a lot when I'm doing trainings is, how can I support you? And you might not have the answer right away. So don't just ask at once. Maybe listen, maybe notice if there's group texts and there's people talking about kid stuff and your friend group texts and you know your friend is struggling with infertility. Maybe side text your other friends and say, hey, let's create our own messaging around kid stuff, or let's make sure when we're having happy hour, like, let's not talk so much about mom stuff. And I'm not saying we've got to abolish talk about mom things, but maybe just create more awareness around what that friend might be going through. And a lot of that just goes back to asking, like, what do you need and how can I be supportive to you?
I love it. Is there anything that we haven't asked about that you wanted to share in the last couple of minutes?
I think, gosh, we covered a lot, didn't we, ladies?
We did.
I just, for me, I think that it's really important for women to know that they don't have to feel shameful for their outcome of infertility. And oftentimes it feels, because the language is, failed IVF, failed cycle, a lot of the word failure, that you aren't a failure as a woman. So I just want to cover off on that as something that's really important to recognize, that we aren't failures. We're just starting a different chapter.
Beautiful place to end. Yeah. Thank you so much.
That's
we love
perfect.
talking to you. We could have, we're going to have to stay connected for sure. We could
For
have talked to you
sure.
for a
Absolutely.
lot longer.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you, Lana. It was so
See
nice
you
to talk with
later.
you.
We hope you'll join us next time for more family building stories and resources. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you never miss an episode. And follow us on social media at allpathsfb, or visit our website, allpathsfb.org, for more information about our work. All Paths Family Building is so grateful to the members of our circle of support who are vital to our ability to provide emotional support, education, and advocacy that is open to anyone struggling to grow their families. Today, we want to recognize and thank Fertility Centers of New England, a first fertility center. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please help spread the word so that anyone who is struggling to grow their family can join the conversation. It's an honor to walk with you on your family building journey.